If you've ever spent any amount of time hanging out in the world of fat talk or fat acceptance, you might have heard this.
You want to know the biggest secret of the diet industry? A secret that is widely known but kept from you on purpose? Are you ready? The secret is that 95% of dieters will regain the weight they lose within 2 to 5 years.
95% of dieters gain the weight back. 95% of dieters gain the weight back.
I gotta be real with you guys. You look like f***ing clowns. Oh, I'm not f***ing kidding.
Trying to see if you can handle the stress. Probably give us that panic attack.
But I'm here to tell you that it's 100% bullcrap. Hey everybody, it's Tony with Big T Bariatric and I'm back at you with another video. Today it is Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. If you could do me a huge favor, look down below and see if you're subscribed to my channel. And if you're not, please hit that button. We are inching ever so closer to that 6,000 subscriber mark, so I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for all the support. So today we're going to talk about this whole idea that 95% of the people who ever try to lose weight gain it back. It's a huge farce, it's a lie, it's a myth, it's not true whatsoever. And yet we hear it constantly spouted in the world of fat talk and in the fat acceptance world. And it's easy to understand why they say it all the time, right? Like it's easy to understand that if you realize that you're really like predestined to be fat, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just your genetics. You're born that way. And the odds of you losing weight are 1 to 5%. You really don't have to try, right? Like there's nothing you can do about it. There's no point in putting in all this effort and all this work into losing weight if there's a 1 to 5% chance that you're going to keep it off. Like, why try? Why even bother at that point, right? You can just give in to the fat acceptance world because you keep hearing everybody tell you that 95% of people who try to lose weight end up gaining it back. But it's complete nonsense, all right? And one of the reasons why is I actually mentioned this in a comment in my last video. I said it's weird how all these fat acceptance people are taking all this advice and medical science from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s to back up their point of view. All right, back then we weren't very well versed on nutrition and health. We didn't understand what we were doing. Back then they said cigarettes were okay for you. Back then they said there was nothing wrong with soda. Back then, they got all kinds of things wrong. Asbestos and mercury and all kinds of nasty things. Like, they had no idea what they were talking about back in those days. And nutrition is definitely not one of them. So I asked the question, how come all of these people are getting all this research from the 1950s and 1960s and the 1970s to back up their assertion that losing weight is impossible? But we're going to look at an actual article from 1999, which was 23 years ago, 24 years ago. But the doctor who made that claim back in 1959 that 95% of the people regain their weight, he recanted his statement. And he actually said, listen, we got new science. We're understanding things better. Don't listen to what I said before. Listen to the new research, and the new research is that people are highly successful at losing the weight and keeping it off. So I'm going to sort of switch my perspective here, and I'm going to go into the smaller screen, and I'm going to make this article the bigger screen to make sure that you guys can see it. So we're going to switch right now. All right, guys, so this is the article from the New York Times back in 1999. It's by Jane Fritzish. However you say her name, I don't know, but her name is Jane, all right? And the question, and the title of it is 95% regain lost weight, or do they? And there's a question mark there. So you can clearly see it's the New York Times, and there's an article here. And it starts off, it is a depressing article of faith among the overweight and those who treat them that 95% of people who lose weight regain it, and sometimes more within a few months or years. So that was ultimately the conclusion that studies made decades ago in the 50s and 60s, all right, that 95% of people who lost weight would gain it back. It says that statistic has been quoted widely over the past 4 decades in congressional hearings, diet books, research papers, and seminars, and it is the reason so many people approach dieting with a sense of hopelessness. But in fact, obesity researchers say no one has any idea how many people can lose weight and keep it off. Now, as researchers try to determine how many people have succeeded, they are also studying the success stories for lessons that might inspire others to try. So there's new research, all right? Stop looking at the stuff that was 4 decades ago. We have new research, and it's saying we have no idea the percentage of people that are losing weight. All we can do is gather a group of people and measure that, and then try to explain it across how many billions of people are on the planet right now. So you can't take a group of a handful of fat people and say, okay, well, most of them gained their weight back, so I guess that's going to be the static number we use for everybody. But here we go, right here. That 95% figure has become clinical lore, said Dr. Thomas Wadden, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. There is no basis for it, he said, but it's part of the mythology of obesity. So it's clear right there. It's become lore. It's absolute myth. It's not true. The 95% number, it's not true. It's lore. It's myth. All right. This is from a Dr. Thomas Wadden, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Kelly Brownell, the director of the Yale Center for Eating and Weight Disorders. So here's somebody you should listen to. If you didn't want to listen to the psychiatrist, listen to this guy. He's the he's the director of the Yale Center for Eating and Weight Disorders. He said the number was first suggested in a 1959 clinical study of only 100 people. Only 100 people. The finding was repeated so often that it came to be regarded as fact, he said. Since then, nearly all studies of weight loss recidivism have followed patients in formal hospital or university programs because they are the easiest to identify and keep track of. But people who turn to such programs may also be the most difficult cases and may therefore have especially poor success rates. So here's the thing. Back in 1959, how bad do you think the obesity epidemic was? Nowhere near as bad as today. They didn't have nowhere near the amount of obese people. They studied 100 people. And what they were finding is that those who were obese were of the most severe cases. So they had the most poor success rate. So that's where the stats came from. To get a more accurate picture, 2 researchers are studying long-term dieters for a project called the National Weight Control Registry and have found it surprisingly easy to collect success stories. About half of the people who maintain a substantial weight loss for more than a year had done it on their own, they found. So half the people who lost the weight on their own kept the weight off. That's remarkable. That's not 5%. That's not 1%. That's half of the people. That's 50%. That's a huge increase of the amount of people who are able to lose the weight on their own and keep it off. All right? This suggests that many people have found ways to lose weight and keep it off, but have never been counted in formal studies. Yeah, how many more people out there have done it on their own? And they weren't part of a study. They weren't being studied. They weren't part of a program. They just went off and did it on their own. Like me, my success story is going to be part of a study because they're sort of like counting the people at my program and what their weight loss was. And so I'm going to be a part of that study. I don't know how much, but I'm going to have regular visits probably for the next several years at my bariatric clinic, getting weighed and stuff like that because they're going to keep track of all the data. But there is something very optimistic. Hold on. There's something very optimistic about this whole data set, said Dr. Rena Wing, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh and the Brown University School of Medicine. Without much effort, we have identified 2,500 people who have succeeded. So that's a much wider number than the 100 that they were counting on before. Dr. Wing and Dr. James O'Hill of the University of Colorado are collaborating on the registry project, which they began 5 years ago with financing from drug companies and other sources. They are compiling detailed histories of successful long-term dieters, people who had maintained a weight loss of at least 30 pounds for at least 1 year. Most of the volunteers were solicited through articles in newspapers and magazines. It was really to convince ourselves and convince the world that we are people who are successful, and then to learn from them. To their surprise, Dr. Wing and Dr. Hill found that on average, the respondents had maintained a 67-pound weight loss for 5 years. Between 12 and 4% had maintained a loss of more than 100 pounds. So wow, I mean, most of them were able to lose 67 pounds or less for 5 years, but 12 and 14 have maintained a weight loss of more than 100 pounds. I mean, those numbers are remarkable. The success stories might not have been so surprising had it been clear that the 95% failure rate was so poorly founded. Again, it was poorly founded. It was lore. It was myth. The figure comes from not from any kind of random sampling, but from a study of 100 patients treated for obesity at a nutrition clinic at the New York hospital in the 1950s. In 1959, its authors, Dr. Albert Stunkard and Mavis Lauren Hume, published a paper in which they concluded most obese patients will not stay in the treatment, most will not lose weight, and of those who do lose weight, most will regain it. So that's what they concluded back in 1959. That conclusion, Dr. Brownell of Yale said, has since become the most frequently quoted statement in obesity literature. And it's easy to understand why. I already explained it. If you can already say that 95% of people are going to fail, then you don't even have to try. So that's why all these fat activists are grabbing it up and they're eating it as fast as they can, and they're digesting it, and they don't want to give it up. Dr. Stunkard, who was the head of that study, who is now a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania, he has since passed. He passed in 2014. Says the study was perfectly respectable for that period. All right, like I said, in 59, they didn't have the kind of obesity problem they had today. They had a very small sample size of obese patients. So it was perfectly respectable for that period. The paper made a big impact because everybody thought obesity was pretty easy to treat. So it did change some minds. People realized, okay, obesity might not be that easy to treat, which is something that probably needed to change and still needs to change if we are going to help people lose weight. It is not an easy thing to treat, all right? This showed that for whatever reason it wasn't. But the study has little relevance to the current understanding of how to control weight, said Dr. Stunkard, who specializes in the treatment of obesity and eating disorders. The 100 patients in the study were given a diet and sent on their way, he said. So that's why there's no psychiatric help. There was no mental therapy. There was nothing. It was, here, go on a diet and go on your way and do it. And if you fail, which it might have even been the wrong diet for all we know. It could have been sugar-laden. It could have been full of carbohydrates. We don't know the diet they were given. But they were just given a diet and went on their way back in 1959 when they had no idea what caused obesity. So come on, all these people who are living these lies and saying 95% will gain it back, they have no idea what they're talking about. That was the state of the art in 1959, he added. I've been sort of surprised that people keep citing it. I know we do better these days. So the doctor, the very doctor who did that study in 1959, recanted on his original conclusion. He's surprised that people keep citing it. And I know we do better these days because research on nutrition is getting better. The science on nutrition and health are getting better. You can judge somebody's health by the number on the scale. The bigger they are, the heavier they are, the more likely they are going to die younger, the more riskier it is, the more likely they're going to develop conditions and diseases and problems as a result of their obesity. We know this now. The intervening years have brought significant changes to the treatment of obesity, and the most important of which, Dr. Stunkard said, has been the introduction of behavior modification techniques. Since the 1959 study, though, the statistic has been reinforced by other clinical studies which also showed people with discouraging results. Unless we can prove they're typical, the data cannot be generalized, said Dr. Brunel. The people we see in clinics tend to be more overweight and have more psychological issues. They are more likely to be a factor of 2 to have binge eating problems. So again, it goes back to the mind. I've been saying this all along since I started my channel. It's psychological issues. All right, so they're starting here in 1999 to point out and to realize that most of the people who have binge eating disorders and end up gaining weight have psychological issues. They're dealing with trauma. So it's not so easy as here's a diet, go on your way, like many people act like it is. It's psychological. New research on successful dieters will disappoint those hoping for a magic bullet solution. Most had simply eaten less and healthier food and exercised regularly. That's the thing. That's the key. That's what they're starting to find out. They had simply eaten less. They've eaten healthier food and they exercised regularly. So yeah, eating less is part of it. So the ones that were able to successfully lose weight and keep it off, they had to eat less. Say it with me, everybody. They had to eat less. All right, louder in the back, please. They had to eat less. So, you know, if you want to read the rest of this article, I'm going to put the link down in the description for you along with all my other links. So if you want to support my channel, if you love what I'm doing, you can support on Patreon or send me a donation on PayPal to help support the channel. If you want to join part of the Big T Bariatric family, there's links to my Facebook, my Twitter, links to my Discord, and a link to my email if you want to send me an email. So we've got lots of ways to connect and be a part of the Big T Bariatric family. So I appreciate you guys very, very much. That's my video for today. I hope you got something from it. I hope you learned from it. And it's very easy and plain to see right there that 95% of people fail and regain their weight is a complete lie. And it's based upon old data that the person who did the study recanted on 20 years ago. All right. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think down below. Leave a comment, leave a like, share, do all that stuff. I appreciate you. I love you. God bless you.